Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Engaged by the Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Father Peter Julia, and today I got the great pleasure to sit down with one of my good priest friends, Father Randy Hoang. Father Randy is right now kind of the Archbishop's secretary. Technically, he's called the coordinator of the Episcopal office. But Father Randy and I entered seminary the same year together, and we really have done many of the same things. In fact, we talked about how we've had almost all the same assignments with one another. And over the years of seminary and now priesthood, we've become great friends. So we talked about what it's like to be collaborating with the Archbishop on a daily basis, what his job is like. And then he was really incredible about sharing some of his own journey and some of the challenges in his family when he realized that he had a vocation to the priesthood. So I'm really thankful to get to sit down with him again. And I hope that he could be on the show sometime in the future. God bless you all. Father Randy, welcome to the show.
Sorry, I was really thirsty.
Great timing.
Sorry, I was really thirsty.
No, I mean, that's good. That's good. We'll just keep starting talking. Welcome to the show, Father Randy.
Thank you, Father Peter, for having me.
It's good. You know, one of the reasons I wanted you to be on the show here is we're two of the younger priests, as in like our priesthood, our time in priesthood. Because are you 3 years? 4 in June?
Approaching 4 years this June.
Okay, yeah, and then I'll be 6 years in June. And one of the reasons I thought that's super interesting, a lot of people love finding out that we both entered seminary the same year. I don't know, people love that kind of stuff. And so we entered seminary 2012, is that correct?
2012, yeah.
At Mount Angel. How old were you?
I had just turned 18.
And
I just finished high school.
And I was 32.
Yeah.
So that was the big difference. So we started.
I'm 31 now.
Oh, that's crazy.
Think about that. When
old.
You entered, I was still,
Yeah, you were. It is funny to grow up with a guy in the seminary when I'd already done a lot of that growing up, and so it's kind of interesting to observe those things. I still have a couple fun pictures of you with like sweatshirts and red Vans.
I still have that photo of my red Vans.
Those were good.
Those are good stories. I mean, you probably know me the best in terms of my progression from like 18 years old.
Yeah. But I think that this is the best part about it, though, that people don't realize is we've done almost exactly the same thing. And so I'm going to walk everybody through it, right? So we entered Mount Angel at the same time, but I already had an undergrad degree. And so I had to do at the time what was called pre-theology, so 2 years, right? But you had all 4 years of college. So I was always 2 years ahead of you. But we started at Mount Angel, and then we both went to the North American College in Rome. Mm-hmm. We were literally in the same hall in Rome, and then after that, after we got ordained, we both went to Immaculate Conception in Staten.
Right, yeah.
And then you went back to finish your license. I went back to finish my license. Then when we got back permanently, I was at St. Cecilia. And then when I came to be the vocations director, you replaced me at St. Cecilia.
Right.
And then when you were done at St. Cecilia, you were at the Pastoral Center. And now we're both at the Pastoral Center.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, Father Randy's the first person that I see every day I walk in. His desk is really close to the front. And do you want to tell the people what you do now, what your current position is?
Well, my current position, I'm kind of in a combination role. So I serve right now as what we call the pre-secretary to the Archbishop. And so I assist the Archbishop in his daily functioning in his office and scheduling, as well as his ministries and traveling with him. But I also work for the Office of Divine Worship. Yeah. And so in some ways, my work in the Office of Divine Worship almost kind of meshes very well with the office of the Archbishop, because he's the chief liturgist, and so any questions that pertain to liturgy should be coming from his office.
I was going to say, otherwise known as the two hardest jobs in the Archdiocese. Actually, they would say the vicar for clergy who's in charge of priests might be harder, but probably, that's tricky. Yeah. Dealing with us is always a challenging thing. Mm-hmm. But it's cool because Archbishop has never done that before, right? Like had a priest secretary. Yeah. But it's interesting because I think a lot of people in the Archdiocese have not been used to that. But if you go around the country and around the world, in fact, it's a super common position. Many of our classmates and NAC mates and Mount Angel mates are secretaries to their Archbishop, right?
Yeah, I think I told you, what is it? there was a priest from the Diocese of Charlotte. We were making fun of him because we found out that he was, the priest secretary for his new bishop, and we were all making fun of him in our group chat for our class. And then, lo and behold, a week later, I get the phone call. Hey, Father Randy, can we have a conversation? And I'm like, oh, sure. And he's like, would you consider being my priest secretary? I'm like, oh my gosh. I literally was laughing about this friend of ours who does now in this role. But I honestly think it makes total sense, right? Because as a priest secretary, right, a priest understands the life and the demands of a priest,
right? Yeah,
and Archbishop, yes, as Archbishop, he's still in some sense a priest, and so his needs are very similar. But what I found is in traveling with him that it allows him to really be present with the pastor, with the community that he's visiting, but also allows the parish to almost kind of be relieved of any responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right? Where I come in and then I just ensure that things are taken care of and that there's no need for them to worry about, oh, does he need this? Should I ask him about this? Is this been taken care of? It's like, well, you guys just let go and you guys just be present with the Archbishop and allow him and you guys to have conversations, and then I'll take care of the rest. And I think it really does allow, for a better opportunity of conversation versus, him having to come in or the pastor dealing with the stress of not knowing what the Archbishop needs.
Right.
And trying to figure out, how to best, approach that.
And I've seen it happen too, because we're at a ton of the same liturgies. Mm-hmm. And there's just so much planning. And if you show up, because this happens to us as priests, if we're filling in at a parish or something, some parishes have things so dialed in, and there's a sacristan and everything is set up and there's altar servers and everything is really well dialed in. And so you essentially show up and vest and then they give you the update. But sometimes you show up and you're like the sacristan and you got to check with the music director and you have to do all these details. Yeah. And you're about to celebrate the Holy Mass, but you're really having to find out all these logistical things. So it's a little hard to enter in. And I've witnessed the fact that you do all of that stuff leading in, and Archbishop just shows up, vests, he's speaking with the servers, and then you give him all the vital info, and you could see that he's able to enter into the Mass a lot more readily. And I could see how much of and also I owe you kind of an apology. I feel partially responsible for you being the Archbishop.
I've been waiting for this apology for a very long
time,
so thank you.
It's a really selfish thing to do because I just wanted a friend in the office. No, I thought, because I can't remember, these things come up just here and there, especially when
I've always wondered too, kind of like where the conversation started from.
I do believe it started from Archbishop. Like, actually, I think he really did. He mentioned it, and then it became a little bit of a topic for discussion. And then I don't do this very often, but I called him one day on a Monday and I said, Archbishop, for what it's worth, I actually think that Father Randy is the right man for the job. And these are all the reasons. And I told him, I said, to free you up, to understand when you travel, maybe what not to schedule the next day, just what it's like to have the schedule of a priest. He's really organized, I just think. And it was funny because he actually said, Father Peter, I really appreciate you calling. He goes, because this has been on my mind in prayer. And he said it was helpful to just get a little bit more of that affirmation, to think that he was on the right track. And it's been pretty cool. I mean, I think that you have a fun, we were just talking about before we started that Sarah, our producer, was mentioning that I won't always know all of the guests so well. Oh, I should make sure I have the volume off on this little guy. But but it is true that we kind of banter around and joke around a lot. But, I don't know, that makes kind of a big difference sometimes, I think.
Yeah, and I honestly think it's good to be able to have that relationship where, you're able to banter, because it shows how comfortable you are, right? And obviously with you and I in our line of work, we, a lot of our work, are affected, by how we are. But it's good to have that banter in the office because it allows people to be free to be able to voice their opinions about X, Y, and Z, and be more effective in being able to, conduct what's the best for whoever it is, the Archbishop, for your office, for, the Vicar for Clergy, or wherever else. Yeah. Right. It's been quite 8 months.
Oh yeah, no, the whole beginning of it, because it's a total restructuring of the office in many ways. I marveled at you the other day, if you don't mind me saying.
Oh,
Honestly,
I'm blushing now.
well, this is a funny thing. I really do.
This never happens. Never happens.
Well, this happened the other day too, because I got to lead the YCP Lent retreat, and you're their chaplain currently. Maybe outgoing, right? There's probably somebody new. It seems like because you've been doing it for a while, right?
I've been doing it for 2 years.
Yeah. So it's probably going to be a new chaplain sometime soon. But when I meet other people, though, and I see just their gifts and talents, like for example, Sarah, again, our producer, I heard her sing the other day, and I knew she could sing, but then that I really do like seeing people's talents and trying to put that together in a way, because I know you just don't have every talent. And so just trying to build a team that has the stuff that you need to get to that spot of furthering the gospel and doing what we want to do. But it was just, we work in an office building. A lot of people call it a chancery. We call it the pastoral center. But we're all in offices, and it's not always like the brightest, most upbeat environment in the world, right? But you do such a great job at bringing in a lot of humor with people, and the other day, it was actually when Mary Frances was there, and I think what you said Mary exactly. Frances. You said, "Bye, Grandma," and just the way that she looked at you afterward was so funny. And you said, "Bye, Grandma," and she just couldn't. She's usually pretty quick-witted, but you had diffused her so much, she had no words, and it was so funny. Yeah. But I think that just makes everybody in the office more at ease, and I just think that's a gift. Yeah. Yeah, it's super fun. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so important, and obviously the work that we do in the Pastoral Center are oftentimes very serious things, right?
That's true.
But it's so important to have the levity there, to allow us to be able to recognize that, these are some serious things that we need to work on and to talk about, but at the same time, right, that there is hope, right, and that we need to be able to allow ourselves to receive that, right, and not be too serious, because what tend to happen is that we get bogged down with our work, and we get pessimistic, and we get, down about X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And it's like, well, yes, it is what it is, but we have to be able to move on. We have to be able to smile and say, well, the church moves on, right? And I think the Pastoral Center has become a really good place of work, but also a place of building friendships and family, right? And when we're able to do that, that's when we become effective, being able to help the Archbishop further the mission of the church.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that you say it like that too. I think it's always hard anytime that there's some sort of like adversarial relationship between whoever the superior is and whoever they're leading. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to follow their bishop, but we're very like-minded in the reality that that's what we are here to do. The bishop is actually the successor to the apostles, and we assist him in his ministry. And so to not support the Archbishop, it really could be sort of like a cancer, amongst the presbyterate. And so it's kind of nice to help him in that mission and keep the environment, a positive one, and one that's not always so heavy, because we do deal with heavy things. But I'm also thankful too, just because you're more recently ordained enough that when I asked for a couple pieces of help on the seminarians, you still know most, if not many of them, some of them very well. And every once in a while, that's difficult too. And of course, I'm a pretty cheery person, but sometimes, just like any dad that has 30 sons, they make you angry sometimes, or they do things that I'm like, what were you thinking? Just like our dads used to say to us. Yeah. And every once in a while, you need somebody to talk to. So I appreciate having that there.
You need that, and I think, obviously, in this line of work, sometimes it's difficult to be able to talk to other people about it, because obviously there's things that, we discuss that are not privy to the public. But no, I mean, it's been really good to have you in the office and to be able to be a part of, furthering the mission, of our bishop. Yeah. Right. And as you mentioned, the successor of one of the apostles, right? This is, we keep that in mind. This work of ours is not simply this clock in, clock out thing. Yeah. This is our life giving to God and to the mission that He's entrusted to our church. And if we keep that in mind, right, then we see the light at the end of the tunnel, even when things are difficult.
Yeah.
And, and whether that's in your line of work with vocations or my line of work.
Do you find like it's been 8 months, you said, is that right?
About
Or
8 months.
something like that, yeah.
About 8 months. Yeah. Not that I'm counting. 3 years, right?
But speaking of difficulty though, like in
Yeah.
8 months, would you say that what has been the most difficult thing in your position generally that you have to deal with? I'm
Well,
sure there's a few things, but-
one, because this role is completely ex nihilo.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's never existed in Archdiocese of Portland.
Right,
It's
right.
existed elsewhere, right? But obviously, in certain dioceses, that person is utilized in a different way, right? So I think for me, it was really the difficulty was switching from being an assistant priest, where I received direction from my pastor, and I received direction from staff, right, to now being the one having to make decisions, right,
Yeah,
and even more so sometimes, of making decisions on behalf of the Archbishop to help him. And at times I question myself, well, what can I offer in my limited capacity? Right. One being, a guy who entered out of high school, so I never really had a job. I didn't really hold any positions. And so obviously that kind of, pulls back a little bit. But then also being, a priest only for, 4 years, right? And only 2 of which I was in the parish.
Yeah.
And then now being in this role of like, well, how am I supposed to do this with then people who are very experienced, in whatever it is that their field is, and saying, hey, Father, what are your thoughts on this? I'm like, well, I'm trying to figure out myself what my role is in all of this.
That's
right?
great though, yeah.
But, I recently had a conversation with the Archbishop, a very honest conversation where I was at, and he was very affirming, and in recognizing that, no priest is trained for these kind of roles. No, I mean, I guess no priest is trained for anything, right?
Yeah.
But to be a priest in giving his life to the church and offering the sacraments, no priest is trained to be your role in vocations or my role as a priest secretary or anybody else, right? But yet we've been charged with this.
Yeah, it's
right?
all on the job training.
Yeah, it's on the job training, but it's also recognizing that God is going to give us what we need.
Right.
Yeah. But I think for me, it's also recognizing that I have to be humble and I have to recognize that I'm learning in the process as I go. And a good friend of mine I spoke to about, certain things. He's like, well, you have to let go of the fact that you're not going to always be in control and right, and recognize that you're allowed to make mistakes and to just try new things. Right. And I was like, oh, okay. Because, for me, going into this role as the priest secretary, I'm like, oh, I have to have everything perfect.
Yeah.
I have to know all the answers. I have to make sure that I know exactly what's going on and, to control it, right? Because my job really is to help him, right, in his job.
Yeah.
In order to do that, I have to be able to be in control, right? And I think for me, the struggle is recognizing that I'm not always in control, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
And that's why I tell myself all the time, it's okay not to be in control. It's okay to not be perfect. Right. And that's something I think for me is a spiritual battle, recognizing that it's not me, right, that should be in charge. It's God.
Right.
And to go in those moments where I'm having difficulties or frustration, saying, God, where is it that you're wanting me to go? And where is it that you're wanting me to be directed to best help my bishop in his role as being the chief shepherd of this diocese, but even more so as a father figure, right? And so I'm constantly reminding myself of that. My role is to help him be the best father he can be to his people.
Yeah, that's incredible, honestly.
And just recognizing that I don't have all the answers, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And constantly having to discern, where God is wanting things to go, and asking questions to those who have more experience in various fields, that being, you, Sarah, Father Todd, Monsignor Betchart, right? And recognizing that we're a team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
it's okay to not have answers.
Right.
But we have to work together. And I think the ability for us to banter, allows that environment for us to be able to say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Without feeling this pressure of like, oh, I have to be right, or I have to know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. You're right. Like the wealth of experience that's in our building, you don't have to know everything. And I think that's kind of why you're the right man for the job, because there is a certain amount of humility that you approach it with. And when somebody doesn't come off as a know-it-all, then it's like, oh, I can work with that person. And in fact, it's funny when you're talking about the control piece of it, because I think we all could be that.
Sure.
But I've been with you when you've like remembered something, and we all have this experience, right? You're like, like somebody does that, and then you remembered there was a thing that you were going to do or an email that you were going to respond to, and that was supposed to be yesterday afternoon or something like that.
I'm like, oh, well, I guess not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Archbishop even said to us before too, and this was good advice, and who knows who gave him this advice all the years ago, but they said, I just let go of the idea of getting caught up. He's like, there's no such thing as being caught up, right? Because he's like, every day of his priesthood up to a point, he's like, I'm trying to get caught up. And I realized I've never been caught up. So that's just kind of an illusion. We're always working toward the goal, but it's never like, wow, I got everything done, because in 5 minutes, something else is just going to come.
In those 5 minutes, I stopped checking emails.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am done for the day. I have accomplished the task of the day.
That's right.
But no, I think, that is very true. I've never looked at it that way, that you're never going to be caught up. It's kind of daunting, actually.
Yeah. It's a daunting idea, right? But then if you just let go, it's the realization that Archbishop has been realizing this. I think he says himself. You would think he's very humble in the fact that he's realized this more in the last probably 5 to 10 years than any other time in his life, that it's Christ's church, not Archbishop Sample's or any of ours. And so that does kind of take some of the pressure off. You're like, oh, okay, I can't do everything.
Right.
Like, this is the Lord's church, and he's actually the one in control rather than any of us. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering this too, but Archbishop's really fun to work for and with. I think everybody is probably very curious about that. And of course, I was speaking to a friend of mine recently. We had that, our pastoral center, we had a Lenten retreat at the grotto. So for those who are not from Portland, but we have this beautiful Marian grotto here, all these like rock walls and everything. And they are able to do outdoor masses, and it's beautiful during Christmas time, and the Servites run it. But we had a retreat there, like a day retreat for Lent. And while we were there, Archbishop celebrated the noon mass. And one of my friends from the air base is very close to the grotto. And so he reads at their like 12:15 mass, and he was reading that day. So everybody's like, oh, do you know that guy in uniform? I was like, yeah, he's a friend of mine. And it's funny because he said to me that day, he's like, gosh, Archbishop is so great. And I said, and I kind of filled in what I thought he was thinking. I said, because he preaches with authority. Yeah. He's like, exactly. And it's true. When you hear Archbishop Sample preach, he really does preach with authority. And that gives a lot of people a lot of confidence. And so I think that people might receive that in a certain way if the only way that they knew our Archbishop is through hearing him preach a homily. You might not know like the pastoral, really kind guy in just day-to-day interaction. Because, we actually have to travel with him and sit in airports and sit next to him on a plane and eat meals with him and everything like that. But he's always super considerate of us, how we're doing. And actually, it is shocking sometimes when your own Archbishop wants to know your opinion. You're like, my opinion? You're like, well, okay. And so he does collaborate a lot. And I think everybody probably wonders that about bishops of the church. Well, what are they really like, you know?
I would say like bishops or priests.
Yeah, that's true. We're a mystery, Father Andy.
Oh, Father, you're wearing shorts today.
Okay, cut it off, Sarah. This is a mystery. We've gone way too far behind the mystery. Father Randy does not wear shorts.
I wear shorts all the time. Not anymore in my job. But the mystique of, clerics in the church, whether that's a priest or a bishop. But obviously, we're very privileged to be able to, be a part of a more intimate relationship with him in terms of our ability to travel with him and get to know him, right? But at the end of the day, right, his heart is with the people, right? Yeah. I think that's the one thing that people often will misunderstand him for, is that he has a very, particular exterior to him and persona. But at the end of the day, he loves his people, and he desires to father him in the best way that he thinks that God is wanting him to do it, right? and again, we have the privilege to be able to encounter that on a more regular basis than most people do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, even the way I see him interact with our seminarians, it's, he meets with every single guy every year for an hour.
Yeah.
But there's all these other events we do where he meets with them at other times too. So I'm always like really shocked that he takes that much one-on-one interaction personal. And his philosophy is sort of like, if I'm going to lay my hands on, if I'm going to ordain that man, I need to know that man. And so I'm like, man, that takes a lot of time, because we've heard stories out there where people say, I mean, this sounds really sad. People, oh, my bishop doesn't even know my name. Yeah. And you're like, wow, that is just not the reality here. And so, that's kind of a privilege.
It's a no-brainer, I think, for our bishop to, if he's ordaining a guy, to say, well, I should know who he is.
Yeah. Isn't it shocking that some people just don't?
As a collaborator of mine,
for sure.
An agent of mine, I should know who he is. But we are very fortunate to have an archbishop that's very hands-on. And as we're exploring now with the archbishop kind of how to move forward with this ministry renewal in our diocese, right? The hope is that he's going to be more present with our schools, with our priests, and with our parishes.
Yeah, to free him up for that stuff. Yeah, it's funny. Of course, I talked to so many guys about their own discernment and vocation story. Your vocation story is kind of an interesting topic, because it was really... It was almost more fast-tracked for you, right? And because you come from a unique community, like being like Vietnamese American. And so what was that like, your own, how did you know that you wanted to be a priest, or where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the process of me, quote unquote, discerning the priesthood and entering the seminary
super fast
was pretty quick. I mean, it happened within like 2 weeks.
That's so crazy to me.
Which I think I always joke with Father Henderson, you were fast tracking me because you wanted to get out of that office. Right?
That's right.
I was the last one to be accepted under Archbishop Lasney and Father John Henderson.
Yeah, so Father John Henderson.
I was the final one.
For other people out there, Father John Henderson is the pastor for St. Anthony in Tigard. Yep. And so he admitted both of us, and he was vocation director for 3 years, but he really loved parish ministry. So he wanted to go back into the parish.
Yeah. Which makes total sense.
Right? Yeah, it makes complete sense.
That's where most priests' hearts are.
Yeah, because Father Jeff he was 8 years in the vocations office. And so that's so funny. I felt the same way. Like he gave me a little kick in the pants.
He's kind of like, okay, let's get you through. I'm done. I'm ready to go. Give me a parish. But obviously that's kind of a joke. But outside of that, I would say the vocation the discovery of my vocation happened over a course of 18 years, right? But it was
what's your parish?
It was those 2 years.
Growing up.
So my home parish is Our Lady of Hoang, which is the Asian or the Southeast Asian Vicariate Parish.
Yeah.
More commonly known as the Vietnamese parish.
And technically our biggest community, right?
Yeah. One of the biggest parish communities. Also, given that it's an ethnic parish, and so people do travel to the parish,
right?
Versus like being a localized parish that has like a boundary, right? But no, I grew up in a Vietnamese household to immigrant parents, right? So growing up, going to mass, praying, which is kind of part of the routine of things. And so I often will say that I was kind of born into the typical cradle Catholic household that goes to mass on Sundays, that prays before meals, but nothing else, right? And I would say that I owe my vocation to 3 women, and I've spoken about this multiple times before, as a seminarian, but also as a priest. And that is my grandmother, my mom, and Mary. Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 women that have really been the catalyst to, helping me discover the vocation of the priesthood. And so I grew up in that household. Surprising to most, right? I was a very quiet and introverted kid, right? I didn't have many friends. I kind of didn't really fit in with most of my peers. Like I didn't like sports, didn't like games. I kind of was like, you're a homebody kid, and so I was bullied a lot growing up.
Oh, okay.
Right? So
that was kind of I don't think I ever heard you really talk about that. I didn't know.
Yeah, that. I mean, most people, expect me, to be this very popular kid growing up. I was not. I was like the weirdo. Like I was a weirdo kid that didn't have friends, that didn't go anywhere. Oh, gosh, right? I just kind of stayed at home, right? So that was my upbringing, right? Is I didn't really have this identity in the community and in the school or at home. I always kind of felt that I was kind of, odd one out. But growing up, my parents were working, and so I spent a lot of my time with my grandmother. And I remember one night I was probably 5 years old, and she said, "Hey, let's start praying." And so she taught me how to pray. and she taught me how to pray the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be. She said, okay, make sure that before every night, before bedtime, these are the prayers you say. So that was a habit of mine that kind of just evolved over the years. And so I would go to Mass, I'd go to Sunday school, I would pray those prayers, but there was never really I never identified myself as a Catholic. It was kind of something that I did, which I think most young people nowadays kind of could, easily identify with. But in 8th grade, my mom suffered depression. And again, this is something I've spoken about at length before on Modern Day Radio, but also in other avenues. It's nothing new, right? And I've asked her to talk about this actually before. But yeah, she had depression, and I was really struggling with, where I was in life and kind of where I was going, in life. But also kind of the question of, well, does God really exist? Right? I was really struggling with that question of, well, here is my mom who is this devout Catholic, who is this phenomenal mother and daughter, right? Caring for my mother and caring for the family. She stopped working and stayed home to take care of my brother and myself and my grandmother. Why would God punish someone like this, right? Why would God allow suffering to happen to her, right? And that whole summer, we lived with my uncle. And I really was struggling with this question of, does God really exist?
How old were you at that time?
I was 13 years old. Okay, I was 8th grade, right? 13, 14 years old, right? So obviously also a lot of hormones going through,
Sure.
Right? So puberty and all of that, the full, experience of being a teenage boy and trying to figure out, where you fit in life and where you're going. But I remember that summer, I was sleeping on a cot that whole summer. Right? And I would say I'm a mama's boy. And so, it was very easy for me to kind of let go of my pride of like wanting my own bed and wanting my own room, being with her because I loved her. Right. But I remember every single day she would pray the rosary. And I couldn't get it through my head of like why she would be doing that if God was punishing her. Right? That was my mindset, was God was punishing her for something. Right? But yet she kept praying the rosary and kept praying all these prayers. I'm like, what the heck? Right? And I would say I'm a very stubborn kid. I'm still very stubborn, right? But I remember one night, sleeping on the cot, I looked up and there was an image of the Holy Family, which is very typical in a Catholic household, but also in a Vietnamese Catholic household. But I looked up and I was praying the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be, as I always did growing up, kind of as a function thing. But I didn't feel anything, right? And for some reason, I got very upset, and I started cursing God, and just kind of being very vocal of, why he would allow this to happen to my mom and X, Y, and Z and all these things happening in my life and my struggle with my identity and suffering and being bullied and all this kind of, because it was basically me venting to God at that point.
Yeah.
And at the very end of it, I felt the sense of peace, this overwhelming peace. And I think in that moment, that was the first time I actually prayed.
Wow.
Right? Because it came from my heart. And I was telling God, even though in my heart, I didn't want to believe that there was a God. But I was pushed against the wall and I had to release in some way. Right? And so that following week, I kept going back to those same prayers. But on top of that, telling God how frustrated I was about X, Y, and Z that was happening that day. And so one day, I kind of just stopped. I looked up in this image of the Holy Family, and I just remembered kind of the practices that my mom and my grandma did, right? And they, their practice was that they would not eat meat on Fridays. So it'd be like every Friday they would not eat meat, and they would consecrate themselves to Mary. And so in that moment, I said, out of desperation, right, for my mom to be healed, I said, Mary, I don't know what it is, right, but I have this feeling in my heart of wanting to go to you. And I said, Mary, if you heal my mom, I will abstain from meat for the rest of my life for you on Fridays. Right? It was kind of those things where I was just so desperate.
I can't believe I've never heard the story.
Really?
By the way, we've been together all these years. I think you take it for granted.
But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I was an 8th grader, and I was just desperate for my mom to be healed because I loved her so much, and I couldn't stand her suffering like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm just gonna offer everything that I can for that. And so I said, Mary, I will abstain from meat for the rest of my life on Fridays for you if you heal my mom. And if you know me, maybe something I like to kind of push the boundaries a little bit, right? And so I said, and this is something that I still sometimes question, like if this is something the Holy Spirit did or some stirring. But I'm very adamant that it's the Holy Spirit. But I said, I will give my life to you. And I was like, and looking back, I'm like, that was kind of stupid, right? I was like, being that committal, right, at that age, right?
Yeah.
But I just said it just came out, right? And that following week, the image or the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, the replica, was traveling in the Archdiocese. And there's like 9 replicas of that statue that travels in the world.
Right.
It was coming to Our Lady of Hoang, and my mom had heard about it and she wanted to go. And so she told my dad, I want to go, X, Y, and Z. So my dad said, yeah, we'll go. But that day, every single thing that could have gone wrong went wrong. Like my dad had overtime, and so he got home late. My mom was having a really bad day, like just really bad episode that day, really depressed and just very down. And I was having one of my moods, right? One of my moods as a teenager.
Familiar.
Yes, most people are familiar. One of my moods, right? And so my dad picks her up and we get in the car and they're arguing and I'm just like very just distraught. I'm like, I hate this. And back in the day, there was no AirPods. There was just those, earpods with the strings for the iPod mini.
Wires.
Right? The wires. Yes, the wires. The wires. Right. And I just kind of plopped them in and blasting the music to kind of zone them out.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've experienced that. Most people have experienced that in their lifetime, wanting to zone out. Right. And we got to the parish. And my dad kind of dropped us off and there was a crowd of people and I was so embarrassed of my mom. I was like, she's crying and she's looking like this. And I'm like, and people, what are my peers going to say about me? I'm very insecure about myself. And so I go with that and there's crowds of hundreds of people. And in that moment, the caravan that was supposed to be, transporting Mary to the next location, was putting her in, right? And out of this deep desperation, I said, Mary, like, you have to do something. Like, I don't care if you exist. I don't care whatever it is. Like, you need to do something. Like, I'm just really desperate right now. Right. And I never prayed harder in my life than in that moment. Mm. And in that moment, the statue of Mary was pulled out of the caravan and it turned in the direction of my mom and I. And given there was hundreds of people, but it was in that moment where I realized that Mary was not answering anybody else's prayer, but she was answering my prayer, right? And it was just like, I've heard all these stories, all these miracles, but in that moment, I felt that she was answering my prayers. And she was saying, here I am, right? And kind of fast forward, my mom gets better and I go back to high school. I go into high school and I struggle with all the typical high school things and trying to figure out where my life is going and trying all these things. Actually, surprisingly, I don't know if you know this, but I actually had almost enlisted with the military.
Yeah, I remember you said that
so
one
I took
time.
the ASVAB,
no way.
I took the ASVAB, the physical and everything, and I was going to enter into the Army.
Yeah,
right?
That's wild.
And all this hope, all these plans, but didn't pan out. And so my grandma passed away that same year, that summer, probably in May, right? And February, sorry, it was February. She passed away in February. And at her funeral, or on her deathbed, the person that she wanted most there was a priest. And my grandma had 12 kids and all these grandkids, right? So you'd think that she'd want one of her kids there with her, but she wanted a priest. And as I'm sitting there in that moment, and later on, her sister asked me, "Have you ever considered becoming a priest?" But in that moment, as I'm sitting there as she's dying, the first person in my life that's really significant that is dying, right? I kept replaying in my head, like, who do I want to be? Why do I exist? All this stuff. And I saw that all in the priest, right? And for the 18 years of my life, my struggles of being bullied, my mom being sick and all these things, I tried all these careers, right? And did all these internships, searching for something. And what I was ultimately searching for was I wanted to be a hero, right? And I saw that in the person of the priest as my grandma was dying, right? And so when the question was posed to me, have you ever considered becoming a priest? I, of course, like any good person, said no, right? But deep down in my heart, there's that tug of that's where you want to go.
Yeah.
And so I'd actually asked a priest to help him during spring break at his parish, which he probably thought was like that's kind of weird, you know. And then the whole week he had me typing stuff, which I hate. I hate office work. Kind of full circle now, right? I'm in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
office.
that's
Full
hilarious.
circle, right?
Yeah.
And I hate it. But that was my way of discerning the priesthood, right? But at the very end of it, I was like, yeah, this is not it for me, right? But I went to the chapel and I prayed. I said, Mary, you know, I don't know what it is, but this feeling is still here. You know, I remember I promised you that, you know, I'd give my life to you. I don't know what that means, but here I am again, back at it. You know, I need something from you again. You know, yeah, hello. You know, and so at the very end of my time that weekend, the priest asked me, he's like, you know, so what are your plans for, you know, after high school? And again, it's the Holy Spirit, right? It just came out of me. Well, I'm considering of becoming a priest. And I think I use the words like, I want to be trained a priest, whatever. I don't know. It was stupid, right? But it was not as eloquent as that. It was something like, you know, I want to be whatever it was.
Right, right.
And he was like, oh, right. And it was funny because like, rather than him being like, oh, that's awesome. He was like, you sure? And these were like all these clear signs of like God saying no, right? Like him saying no. And then my parents saying, are you sure you're going to make it? And all these things, you know, people are doubting me, but this is the first time I'm ever confident in it. And so, you know, again, that process of me discerning was very brief.
Yeah.
Right. But what got me there was a journey.
Yeah.
And I realized that once I got to the seminary, that every single moment of my life, especially in the moments where I was suffering, that was God moving me towards that place where I'd be disposed to be open enough to receive him. Right. And so I look back and I was like, if I wasn't bullied, if my grandma didn't, you know, if my mom wasn't sick, if my grandma didn't die, I would not be open to the priesthood.
Yeah.
But God used those moments of suffering to open me up to receive his call. Right. And as I entered into seminary and going into formation, you know, there's never been a moment where I've questioned.
Yeah, that's
like,
incredible.
Never like
it's
questioned.
Not as common, right?
Yeah, and
Archbishop says that too about his own story, and I'm like,
yeah, and
yeah,
I mean
that's incredible.
And you know, before diaconate ordination, you know, I'd asked at that point Father McDonald from Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh yeah, he was hilarious.
You know, formator. I said, hey, you know, I'm kind of having a hard time with this. Like, it seems like I've been at this for such a long time, and I haven't really ever questioned that God is calling me to this. But yet, every single guy that to me is the most qualified have all dropped out.
Right. Yeah. That's a scary thing.
So I asked him, I was like, is something wrong with me? And like, am I properly discerning this?
Well, Father Brandon, there's nothing wrong with you.
Well, that's what he said. He's like, what do you think? Right?
He was so funny.
But then he told me something which, you know, I still remember. He says, you know, right now, God is giving you a gift of this confidence in your vocation, right? Take it, right? Because you don't know whether or not this will last. Right? There may be a time in your life where you maybe question it, right?
One day you may be named the secretary for the Archbishop, and you might question your life.
Exactly. Well, that's another story I'll tell you about off air. That, you know, one of our confreres told me, and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's very motivating, right? But he said, in this moment, receive what God is wanting to give you, and don't think about it, right? And as I look back, I'm like, well, yes, God has made me for this, and that's what a vocation is, right? Is God has made each and every one of us for a reason, and our role in life, right, is to discover that vocation. And when we land in that vocation, right, even with the difficulties and the frustrations and the hardships of it all, right? I mean, look at a mother and a father, right? What they deal with, right? You're still going to receive that joy and that fulfillment and that peace that you can't receive anywhere else, right? When you find that vocation. So yes, I would say that I discerned very quickly, right, in terms of getting into the seminary, but in terms of the path of getting there, it was 18 years in the making.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly incredible. I never got to hear it sort of in a comprehensive way. Sometimes you only hear like these weird snippets.
Sure.
Right? You know, I think one of the things that I was sort of taken by, and I've mentioned this before in just a couple of the other podcasts, you know, the show is called Engaged by the Spirit. And that's that moment. And the reason that I wanted the show to be called that is because I feel like that's what happens, right? You said, I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit or what, but there was a moment where like something engaged with your life and then you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
why would I say something so crazy? Like
Yeah.
Randy would never say,
No.
I'll just give you my life. It's like, where did that come from? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I found myself doing things like that too. Like, why
Yeah.
am I saying the
Yeah.
thing that I'm saying? Because it seemed somewhat uncharacteristic, which is, I think, one of those things that allows us to know that it's something's coming from without, right? It's not coming from within, but it's coming outside of
Yeah.
us and kind of God's intervention in our life.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yeah.
Did you, when it came to the bullying, did you just sort of like completely ignore it, or you said you were close with your grandmother. Was there a way that you ever, or did you kind of just like, I hate this, but I didn't address it?
Yeah, well, I think I think it's a combination between being a guy, but also heavily, I think, being Vietnamese. That you don't talk about your feelings.
You shove it deep down.
Shove it deep down, and hopefully it doesn't come up, right?
Yeah.
But I think also because I'm the oldest.
Oh yeah,
right?
right. Yeah.
I always feel like, again, this is however it comes back, that I always have to be in control.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And I always have to be in control of it. But I would say, yeah, I mean, I spoke to a couple of friends about it, right? But it was never something where I was like, yeah, I'm really struggling.
Right.
I kind of kept it as like, well, this sucks, right? But I'm just gonna move on with life, right? And I think that those moments of realizing kind of what I went through does still come up sometimes in my life now. I think we've spoken about this before, right? That we react from past wounds, right?
Yeah,
No matter where we are in life, right? We're always going to be reacting from something, right? From somewhere, right? And I would still say that I do sometimes, right? And I think that's also is something that I do struggle with sometimes in my role as well, is that I'm now put in a position where I should be in control and know things.
Yeah.
And when I'm not in control, I feel uncomfortable, and that's because I recognize that I wasn't in control growing up,
right.
with
Yeah.
me being bullied and whatnot, but also because of my age. But then I also realize at the end of the day, it's not about what I've done or I'm able to do or my age or where I've come from. It's about the fact that God has created me, right? And whatever it is in my assignments, right? He's called me to do this through my bishop.
Yeah.
Right? And to have confidence in that my identity is not based on what has been, but rather that it's based on my relationship with God the Father who loves me, and that he's going to give me what I need to be able to carry forth what it is that he's wanting to have done. And so I would say for most people that that knew me when I was younger would say this is a 360
Yeah.
of of Randy.
Yeah.
The kind of rambunctious guy that I am now was not the case when I was 18.
It's funny though, because it's amazing what you don't know about somebody,
Yeah.
right? Because of the way that we present ourselves out in the world and everything. And because when you got to Mount Angel though, and I don't know, maybe this is partially just because you actually found where you were supposed to be,
Yeah.
but you seemed really happy and content there when you got there. And I remember you had a bunch of friends. Weren't you like the president or the chair? I forget what they called it.
Yeah, I was the chairman for the social of the college for like 2 years. And then I was the class president.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's this projection of, whatever it was. But again, like it's one of those things where when you discover your vocation, right, you really become who you were made to be.
Yeah, it really
right?
changes.
And that's what the seminary was for me.
Yeah.
Was I realized that my identity was not based on what other people thought of me or what I was able to accomplish or what I had.
Right.
But it was in the fact that God has made me for something.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why for folks who have known me since I was little to now to see how joyful I am, it's because I realize who I am.
Yeah.
Right? And I've come to realize, what God has made me for.
Right.
And it's easier for me now to really be myself because I know who I am. Right. And the struggle is in there for that. But no, I mean, it's one of those things where I look at every single thing that has happened and I always look back and say, well, wow, God has always been preparing me for this moment.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one example for, just kind of for the kicks of it. I have a really good friend from the Diocese of Venice in Florida, who's a very athletic guy. You probably know him, called Alex Pins.
Oh yeah, sure.
Very athletic guy, kind of Renaissance guy, like very talented. Kind of, it's very well rounded.
Yeah.
And here am I. I'm like, I don't do anything at all. I mean, it was funny because it was one of the things where I had asked him. So when I was assigned at St. Cecilia's, Janelle reached out to me and said, "Hey, Father, we're going to do a little, blog post and a little insert in the bulletin about you. Can you tell us like some of like your talents or like hobbies?" And I remember texting him and another friend of mine. I'm like, "What hobbies do I have? Like all I do is basically eat. I watch movies and that's about it. Like I don't have any sports I do or any like instruments I play. I don't sing. Like I don't have any of these like quote unquote special things that I have, right?" But here's this guy who's very well rounded, right? And we just became really good friends, And in our last year in Rome, we went on this hike, right? And you know me, and most people who are listening who know me, I'm not athletic at all. Like I'm very coordinated when it comes to the liturgy, but elsewhere I'm the worst. Like I am just the worst. Like give me a ball and I'm like, what do I do with it? I just don't know. Right? I mean, I'm not that bad, right? But here's this guy who's very well-rounded, who I would say would be someone that would bully me when I was younger, right? And we're like becoming the best of friends. Now he's your friend, yeah. Right? We're becoming the best of friends. And so he invites me to go on this hike with him in Norway. And I would say, long story short, he tricked me into this long hike. Right? It was supposed to be like a 1.5 mile hike. It came out to be like 22 kilometers.
Holy
right?
cow.
I was like, right?
Oh,
but
gosh.
In trusting that, well, one, I didn't want to back down. So I went on the hike, right? But at the very end of it, as I was going up there, I realized that God in some way was utilizing this moment to challenge me, to push me beyond what I usually would not do, to tell me that what I'm going to give you now in terms of your assignment, you're going to have to strive to trust that I'm going to provide for you, right? And that next assignment was for me to learn Spanish, right? And so there was a correlation there between what God was doing on a very natural level of my friendship with him and what we were going to do, to him saying, now that you've been able to do this, something that you would never imagine yourself doing and something you would say would be your insecurity, I'm going to use that now to show you that if you trust me and that you give yourself to me, that I'm going to provide for you, which I've kind of carried with me in my assignment at the parish at St. Cecilia's, but also my role now as a priest secretary. Would I ever have imagined when I was 18, I'd ever be in this role? Never.
Never, yeah.
Would I ever imagined, when I was at the parish, I'd be in this role? Never, right? And, when I was asked to be in this role, I was very nervous.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I was very nervous and kind of realizing that I'm going to be put in situations where I'm not comfortable with, and that I don't have the skills for. But if God has proved anything to me, is if I trust him, right, and I give myself to him, and I'm open to learning, that he's going to take me through, and he's going to carry me through it, right? And that was something that I saw very concretely in that hike, as that God was almost bringing me full stature. I thought that, me coming to seminary was at that moment of like, okay, great God, you've kind of healed all of that. But it was actually 11 years later, with becoming friends with this guy and going on this hike where God was saying, remember your insecurity when you were growing up? You've accomplished it, right? And it was funny because even afterwards, going to the parish, going to the gym, which I would have hated, right, became my hobby.
Yeah.
Right? It was kind of almost full circle of God saying, see, if you trust me and you understand that your identity is in me, right, then you have nothing to be afraid of.
Because Monsignor Syack and Monsignor O'Connor made you work out for a year, right?
Made me.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a challenge too, right? But,
yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, so as I'm talking about all of these things, I see, hopefully what you see, and hopefully those of your listeners are seeing, is that if I was not open to trusting God and saying that you can be in control of my life, I would not be where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say that that's for all of us. Is that the thing that we struggle with the most is trusting that God is going to provide for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
You're absolutely
You know,
right.
like, hey, God, you know, I have faith in you. I believe in you. But are you really going to provide for my needs? Are you really going to provide for my family? Are you really going to do this? Right? And until we get to the point where we're pinning up against a wall when there's no more options, that we give ourselves to God, where God is saying, okay, let go. Right? Because you can't control your life. You can't control what happens.
Right.
But if you trust me and you allow me to do what I want to do for you, everything is going to work out, even if it's not in your favor, right? Because what I'm going to do is ultimately going to help you grow in a deeper love and trust of Him, of God, but ultimately to bring that person to heaven, right? And that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
The goal is for each and every one of us to get to heaven. And until we learn to let go and allow God to take over and lead us there, we're never going to get there. And that's what I've learned.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. It's so cool to hear the journey. Because I mean, I would say the same exact thing. You know, I've learned the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just the ability to be able to let go and understand that we're not God. One of my favorite parts of, you ever see the movie Rudy?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's a part where, you know, he has that priest that's kind of journeying with him,
Yeah.
Father Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I forget, it's maybe like 3 or 4 times where he doesn't get into Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know, maybe I haven't studied hard enough. Maybe I haven't prayed hard enough. Maybe I have not done enough. Again, this idea that I can control my way in
Right.
by like meriting this somehow, some way. And or the priest says something like, you know, Rudy, I'm sure that's not it. He says, you know what, in 36 years of priestly ministry, I've come up with 2 incontrovertible facts. There is a God and I'm not him. And I remember that's that incredible realization that when you understand that somebody else is in charge,
Mm-hmm.
it actually takes a massive amount of pressure off of your life to be able to,
Mm-hmm.
to move forward. And it's funny, like you said, when it comes to vocations too, once you're actually living out your true vocation where God has called you to, I think I've said to only just a small handful of people, I almost feel the most myself when I'm preaching a homily, oddly enough, like in that spot where the Holy Spirit sort of just like takes over. And I'm like, who knew that I would ever feel super like most me in a moment like that of all things, right? It's just kind of incredible. Yeah. But yeah, it's so funny. It's like easier said than done. But
Right.
when you see it repeated so many times in your life, though, you really do build up a pretty deep reserve of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still hard.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
it's still
true.
hard. I mean, it's one of those things where it's easier said than done.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
always.
obviously, you know, for you and I, we've, you know, had life experiences that have forced us to bend to God.
You know,
Right? But some people don't get, I mean, some people in terms of their life don't receive that much, say, aggression from God.
well,
Right?
yeah,
Saying,
like it's
here
true.
you go, I'm going to pin you up against the wall now. So for some people, it's like, well, life is just kind of moving and I'm trying to figure out where God is telling me, but he isn't really, he's loud enough.
Yeah, because some of the
Whereas for
guys,
us-
some of the seminarians, it's true. Like a lot of things, there haven't been a lot of trials
Yeah.
for some of the guys. And then I see something that comes up that's truly a trial for them. And you can see what a test it actually is because they hadn't been tested a lot.
Yeah.
But some guys, holy cow, they come from like a million tests or they had a really rough upbringing. And so they have kind of been tried and tested in a lot of ways. And so, eventually it's going to happen. Everybody, you just never know when it's going to happen. Yeah, that's an incredible thing. You know, it's funny. I was thinking about this because we traveled recently to mostly to Poland, but to Rome as well to see our seminarians who were studying there. And we won't go into all the details because
That's not. I forgot the details out there already.
but we were traveling with Archbishop Sample, so that it was the 3 of us. And it was really funny because everything kept going wrong with our travels.
It was not my fault. It was definitely not my fault.
It was
make that very clear.
We just won't we
So
won't
it
go
was Father
too
Peter's
far
fault.
down that road. You know?
I'm perfect.
But there was there was so many things that kept going wrong.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like, Archbishop Sample it was like making him crazy. Like he was getting so worked up over each thing that kind of went wrong. But then it was so funny because the two of us were so resigned to just, okay, well, whatever the next problem is, we'll just solve it like one at a time.
Yeah.
And it was a really funny thing. And we were able to kind of discuss that spending 5 years in Rome was so difficult. And I say this a lot. Maybe I lean into it a little too heavily because a lot of people think that studying there is such an unbelievably like romantic experience. But it's actually mostly pain. It's like you get
good pain.
Yeah,
it's good pain.
Good pain, right?
It's like a nice workout. The endorphins that you receive. You know?
It's like a wonderful opportunity. You really do get some incredible opportunities, but it's really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think when you're doing that for 5 years, it just I don't know how to describe it. It leans on you constantly. And you have to solve problems so often that I think when we were in that situation again, the two of us were just kept shifting into, okay, this is what we need to do. Like it was like problem solving mode after problem solving mode.
Yeah.
But I kind of, in that moment, it made me really thankful for that experience that we went through that. And so then sometimes you come home and things are you have a lot more resources.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I guess this is not that big of a deal, you know, so it kind of really allowed you to assess the proportion of problems.
No, it's true. And, you know, it's just some of the things where it does put you in a situation where you have to learn the spot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's something that's very useful, especially for certain people in certain positions. You have to learn the spot, be flexible, allow things to just kind of move without, you know, being deterred and being upset about it and not really being able to change anything.
Yeah. Yeah. From our studies over there, do you have any like sort of high points or low points that, you know, just favorite parts of studying over in Rome or like things that were super difficult? Or
I would say the high point of being in Rome was the experience of being able to enter into people's lives where I wouldn't otherwise be in the States.
Yeah, that's
right?
totally true.
I mean, yes, it was super neat to be able to be so close to the Holy Father, right? Whether that was Pope Benedict being there or Pope Francis, and being able to study at these universities with these phenomenal professors, and visit these beautiful churches with these relics, right? But I found what was most rich for me was the encounters with the people through my classes and through the friendships at the seminary that have really helped me to grow.
Yeah.
Right. And I look back on that very fondly. You know, I would say most of my closest friends are from my time in Rome, right? That I still talk to. I mean, I have a friend that is in New York that I talk to every single week.
Yeah.
You know, and we're up to date on how things are going with each other and whatnot. And it's helpful because I get insights into what is not my reality.
Yeah.
And it helps me step back
true.
and realize that, you know, it's not always that bad. All right. There's other perspectives and other things that people are struggling with. And it helps me kind of be able to look outside of, you know, my own struggles, my own difficulties in the moment. But I would say one of the richest things that, you know, I received was the opportunity to meet people, the food, the conversations, right? The conversations you have about, you know, whatever it is.
The North American college is interesting in that way because it's like you said, we have guys from all over the country.
Yeah.
So we're with guys that we would not normally be with. And then you start to see, oh, what is your diocese in that part of the country like? Like, what is Catholicism like over there?
Yeah.
And it's funny, there's bigger difference in people. I mean, of course, there's so many similarities, of course, because it's the universal church, but there's a lot of differences that people would never even understand or expect. And it's pretty cool to just understand that about folks.
Yeah. Like, you know, you being in Rome, you get a more universal view of the church. But being in the NAC and having these relationships, you see the church locally in the United States. You know what I mean, I can't tell you how many times I call friends from other dioceses and ask them, "Hey, what do you guys do for this? Or have you guys responded to this yet?" Right? And just picking their brains and seeing, you know, how best to do it.
Didn't you have to talk to like another diocese, and it turned out that one of the priest secretaries was one of my classmates, our hallmate?
Yeah.
And so your position somewhere else was like one of our friends.
Yeah.
It's super funny.
And I just found out another classmate of mine was named the priest secretary.
Oh, wow. What an honor.
And so I'm like, I should give him a call and say,
honor.
how can I help you?
You guys should have like a gift that you send to that person when
or like
that happens.
A national convention.
A national
support group.
Support group.
But I would say, back to your question about Rome, the difficulty. I think for me personally, the difficulty was the language.
Yeah.
I'm not a language guy, and it was hard for me to really, express myself sometimes.
Yeah, same.
That was the hardest thing for me. Being away from home and everything, it wasn't difficult. I mean, I missed home. I missed my family. I missed being able to be at certain things in the diocese. But I knew that I was gonna go home.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a done deal. I was gonna be there forever. But the hardest thing for me was that transition in learning Italian and having to, to express yourself in a language that you're not comfortable with, which actually has really helped me, right, in my ability to learn Spanish. Because now I understand, okay, well, what were my needs when I was in Italy, in a country where I didn't understand probably 50% of what people were saying.
Right.
Right. And it gave me this ability to be more cognitive and intentional about how I related to, parishioners that don't speak English.
Right.
And so that's been very helpful in that.
Yeah, it's funny. I felt pretty similarly too, because I'm such a verbal communicator.
Yeah.
That there were people that I met, actually a friend of mine I met who's like a part owner of the climbing gym, the one that's closest to Rome, really like the city center of Rome. And he spoke good enough English. And so we relied more on the English than we did on the Italian.
Yeah.
But I was meeting some of these people that I really liked and became friends. And it killed me that I couldn't relate how I relate to people normally. And the same thing, even at Immaculate Conception in St. Cecilia, I love the folks from the Hispanic community so much. And it was such a deep frustration that I could not minister in the same way, even though like we both, because of Italian, we could celebrate a Spanish mass and sound fantastic. Like we could sound extreme. Oh, wow, you're so clear that everybody thinks that we speak Spanish afterward. Yeah. And then they'll just be talking to us and you might catch a lot, but the ability to start your own sentences or to preach without a text or something like that is really difficult. And it always hurts my heart that I can't give to them in the same way that I can give to people who speak English. It still frustrates me, to a certain extent. But the funny thing is I think people could really even see, it is amazing. People are incredible. They could see your intention, that you still love them, even if if you're just present to them and you try your very best. It's amazing how far that goes. Yeah. Yeah, but it's hard. Frustrating.
It's hard. And you sit there, you're like, I know what I want to say, but where's Google Translate right now?
I know. That's right. I remember, the schedule was just so crazy while we were there. Because you're not a super morning person, right?
I'm not.
You've kind of become
any day person.
Any part of the day.
No, I'm not a morning person.
And it was sort of like I always joke around that it was the worst of the American schedule and the worst of the Italian schedule, but we just combined it. So we got up early like Americans, but stay up late like Italians.
Dinner was at 7:00.
And so they're like, well, what does that mean? It means you just sleep less, right?
And the constant fatigue.
Oh yeah, just walking all over the city and stuff. Yeah. It was such a crazy experience.
We're not complaining. I mean, it was a great experience. Rome was a great experience.
I just like to tell people what it was actually like. I mean, there's a lot of cool things in between, but
Rome is not as magical.
It's a hard city to live in. It's super noisy,
and
when you live in a city that has tourists 24/7, it was like that Frogger game. You're just going to class and you're like trying to get through tourists as quickly as you possibly can because you become a local.
Yeah.
and it's really
that snobby side of you comes in. These dang Americans.
Yeah. The Americans are always taking
Americans
pictures.
taking photos and
sidewalks.
Why would you order that for dinner? But obviously, you really do become, part of the fabric of the city.
Yeah.
There for 5 plus years. But, I look back fondly with the memories, and I think that's something that we'll always carry.
Yeah.
right? To kind of be able to
Absolutely.
get back on that Rome is always going to be home in a very,
Yeah.
real way compared to other people. Right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think it honestly is probably because of our time there. I think
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to the future, just with the work that we're doing at the Pastoral Center, what we're
Yeah.
helping the Archbishop with.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of things on the horizon. So it's kind of fun
It's exciting.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and I said before we even started the show, I want to thank you for coming on. And I want to thank you also just for putting up with me in the office. And I think that there's going to be some great
I avoid him
future
almost every morning.
together, but he can't really because he's right in the front. So I have to
like,
walk
"Dang
by
it."
your office.
Yeah.
For a little while in the beginning, I would just like sit down even before I ever got to my office. So
You still do.
sometimes
You still do.
I try
know.
to stand more now though.
Yeah.
So because Rochelle, she's very
Rochelle,
demanding.
she's great.
Yeah, she's
No, but it's
that's
no,
Father
it's-
Randy's kind of assistant or partner in crime,
yeah,
so to speak.
yeah.
But
no, I mean it's we are privileged to be able to be in the roles that we're in, to be able to help the Archbishop in a very tangible and intimate way. But no, yeah, I would say it's been a pleasure really work with you. I know that I make fun of you all the time in the office.
hey, that's okay. So
All the
the
time.
feeling's mutual.
Right,
So-
but it's one of those things where it's nice to have someone that is first of all a friend,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
To be able
absolutely.
to kind of be able to talk about things. But yeah, it's
Well, one thing we've been doing on the show is just like we have at Mass, that we have intentions attached to the Mass. I wanted to do that for the show as well, to attach intention. Oh, before I say that real quick, I want to thank you also, because you kind of, we got these beautiful statues of Joseph and Mary and then our Lord on the crucifix in Poland when we were on a trip. But you were my mule. You put it in your luggage.
I'm typically the mule, right?
And
I'm like the Archdiocese mule.
That really saved a lot of money by not having to ship anything. So I got to thank you for that. But I think maybe, honestly, the best intention for today's show would probably be for our shepherd, Archbishop Sample, and for those that we work with at the Pastoral Center. And so maybe I could close us in prayer
Sure,
for that
absolutely.
intention. But again, I just want to thank you for coming on, Father Randy. It's been good. I'm sure you'll be back many times.
sure.
I think you should be a regular on the show.
Oh gosh, there we go.
Okay,
maybe
so-
we have you and myself and the Archbishop here.
Oh yeah, no, it'll be great.
quite a time.
I can't wait till we get him on here. And so let's pray.
All right.
Okay, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Good and gracious God, we thank you and praise you just for what you have done in our lives as priests. We ask you to keep us close to your heart, and we pray in a special way for our shepherd, Archbishop Sample, and for all of those that we work with at the Archdiocese and Pastoral Center. We ask you to help us always make you the center of our life so that we could bring more people into your Holy Catholic Church, Lord. We thank you for this time of Lent that we have, because there's so many obstacles that sometimes are in the way between us and you, and we want to cast those aside so we can grow closer to you. And we thank you for this time, and we ask you to bless all of our listeners, and I ask you to bless us here in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Father Randy.
Thank you.